Did you know millions of Americans live with debt they cannot control? That's why I developed this unique new program for managing your debt. It's called Don't Buy Stuff You Cannot Afford.
Oh, let me see that. If you don't have any money, you should not buy anything. Sounds interesting.
Sounds confusing.
I don't know, honey. This makes a lot of sense. There's a whole section here on how to buy expensive things using money you save.
Give me that. And where would you get this saved money?
How much money do you guys have in your savings accounts?
A couple $100.
About 1,000, maybe.
Are you talking about money-wise?
I end up using most of the money in my savings account, so it doesn't really like work as a savings account. Like I'm not actually saving anything. I'm just storing it there.
I think most people can say that they live paycheck to paycheck. I think the good majority of us do.
David, we've got you right here. Robert, you're right over here, the introductions. This is Dean Board. How are you?
I'm David Yepsen, and I'm a political columnist with the Des Moines Register. But I think this issue is really the most important issue facing the country.
Too many Americans are following the bad example of their federal government. They're spending more money than they make. They're taking out home equity loans. They're charging up their credit cards. They're building up compounded interest and seeing the day in the not-too-distant future where they may not be able to make the minimum.
Does that exacerbate the national problem?
It clearly does, because for 2 years in a row, American households have spent more money than they took home. A negative savings rate. The last time that happened was 1933 and 1934. Not good years for America or the world. Now, we're in a very different situation than 1933 and 1934. But the reason we have to borrow from foreign players who hold more of our national mortgage, who have more leverage on us and we have less leverage on them, is because we're not saving, and that's got to change.
I think it's going to take a crisis before America responds to this. We're not going to be willing to take this pain until it gets to be a real problem.
The concepts of sacrificing and building for a better tomorrow have been pushed aside by our live for today, easy credit, and consumption-oriented society. Many Americans have never seen a rainy day, and therefore simply choose not to save for one. This is a major problem because savings results in increased investment, additional research and development, a stronger economy, and an improvement in our overall standard of living.
Savings essentially is putting aside part of what you produce, part of your income, to have provision for the future. What these various different deficits are suggesting is that we are trying to consume more than we produce. We can do that in the short run, but over the long run, it is of course impossible. Without savings, there is no future.
Americans must start to save again, and they need to invest those savings to help create a better future for themselves, their families, and our country.
When I say trade deficit, do you know what that means?
Deficit usually means something like disorder or something, so something is wrong with it. It's not good.
It's the money that the United States owes.
Is the trade deficit with other countries, maybe?
So if we have a trade deficit, we're importing more than we're exporting.
Okay, there it is.
In 2007, China had the largest trade surplus in the world. And who was dead last? The United States of America.
Yeah, a few years ago I wrote an article for Fortune on sort of the parable of Squandersville and Thriftsville, which was designed to simplify for people problems inherent in persistent and large trade imbalances. Economics tends to put people to sleep, and I thought maybe by creating a couple of islands with inhabitants of quite widely different activities that it might get across a point that otherwise they get lost on. The thrust is that if you own a lot of property, an island in this case, you can trade it off for the things that you eat and consume every day, And you can do that for a long time, but eventually you run out of property, and then you have to work a whole lot harder to provide your own needs, but also to pay back for the debt you've incurred. Short-term actions have long-term consequences that sometimes people don't think about in the short run.
If you're buying more than you're selling, which is what a trade deficit is, eventually your trading partners are going to own a lot of your wealth. When they are not buying your goods and services with this money, they will be looking for ways to invest it. Running large and persistent trade imbalances can be problematic, especially when a country has a low savings rate and its government needs to borrow more money every year to pay its bills.
When the federal government needs to borrow money,
Yeah.
do you know how they do that?
I'm under the assumption that everyone else borrows money from us, so...
In the past, when we ran large budget deficits, our government turned to Americans to borrow that money. After World War II, virtually all the federal debt was owed to Americans. Today, our high budget deficits, our low personal savings rate, and large trade deficits have caused us to become increasingly reliant on foreigners to finance our debt and provide capital for investment. There's nothing inherently wrong with this in the short term, and the truth is America lends money to other countries. However, as our reliance on foreign lenders increases every year, one might ask, what are the longer-term consequences? In the fall of 1956, the world was on the brink of a major international conflict. America's allies, Britain and France, were engaged in a battle against Egypt over control of the Suez Canal. The Soviet Union was threatening to intervene on the side of Egypt. America wanted to avoid military action at any cost and demanded that the British and French allies withdraw from the region. When their request was denied, the U.S. turned to financial warfare. America, which at that time owned much of England's debt, threatened to sell off or dump a significant part of its holdings in the British pound. This would have effectively destroyed England's currency. The result? All British and French military forces withdrew from the Suez region within weeks.
If 15 or 20 years from now, 2 or 3% of the GDP is being paid abroad merely to service the debts or the ownership of assets that have been incurred because we're over-consuming, that will be politically unstable.